Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to our next COVID-19 Conversations with Acumentus video. Throughout this video series, we've been discussing the impact the global coronavirus pandemic is having across various sectors of the property market. Today we'll talk broadly about the national residential property market. I'm joined by Peter Raptis, Director of Residential Valuations at Acumentus. Peter, there's been a significant impact on the way the property market can transact with limitations on open homes and auctions, and we as a valuation team at Acumentus have changed the way that we're conducting our business. These changes have caused a lot of speculation about the potential impact the virus is having on the residential property market. Can we start with you sharing your key observations, please?
Yeah, sure. Look, the market's obviously changed from where we were earlier on in the year. There's no doubt about that. And in a broad context, we're seeing less properties being advertised for sale and transacted as a lot of people just sit back and take stock of what's going on and just evaluate the current situation. So we have seen those changes. We've also seen the way property is being advertised and sold online. We haven't had the actual physical inspections, so that has changed, even though we're going to go back to the physical inspections shortly. So there certainly have been changes of how everyone goes about business at the moment.
Okay. So has there been a noticeable change in price? Has there been any increase or decrease across the board?
Well, I don't know about increase. I don't think we've seen increases over the last month or two. In some cases, we have seen decreases. I don't think it's across the board. When I talk to real estate agents, which I talk to them on a daily basis, when I talk to our valuers on a daily basis, the general feeling is that the prices are still holding up, but in some cases we are seeing some reductions where it's probably a case by case, where what you're finding is you've got a vendor that really has to sell because maybe they've committed to buy another property elsewhere and they really don't have any choice. Another example was I had a lady ring me the other week saying, I don't really want to sell in this market, but I have to because I need to put my mum into a nursing home and we need to sell this property to get the proceeds to be able to put her into the nursing home. And I'm in a position where I really need to sell in this market. So we are seeing some people that are having to transact. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some examples. We had one the other day in the inner city of Sydney where there was basically two identical townhouses. They were literally separated by another townhouse in the middle. Now, the first one sold in September last year for 1.1 million, and the other one just sold the other day for 930,000. That's probably about a 15% reduction. And they were literally identical, same condition, built by the developer a few years ago. So you can look at that, but I don't think we should be saying, well, that's just happening across the board. I think good properties and good areas are certainly holding up, but we are going to find some buyers that are saying, look, I really got to sell and just make me an offer.
Yeah, sure. And the volume of activity, has there been a sort of a noticeable decrease or change in that volume?
Oh, definitely. If you look at if I just start in Sydney initially, but in Sydney, the amount of properties going to auction now compared to a year ago is about half. Now, when you look at the total volume of properties being sold, and that includes private treaty, what you've got to be careful about is a lot of people get hung up about auction results and keep talking about auctions, but even in Sydney, there's probably only about 10 or 15% of properties that go to auction. If you go to somewhere like Perth, auctions are not that common. So if we look at the total listings, which is properties including auctions and private treaty, they're probably nationally about 25 to 30% down from a year ago. So that's a significant drop in properties being transacted and available for sale. So in part, whilst that's not such a good thing for buyers, which means they have less choice. It's actually probably helping prop prices up at the moment.
Yeah, the decrease in opportunities for
Well,
those interested buyers.
it just comes back to basics of supply and demand.
Yeah. And what are you noticing happening with rents, Peter?
Not so good.
Yeah.
I'd say the sales market is holding up better in prices than the rental market. What we've seen in certain areas, and certainly the worst affected areas have probably been the inner city area of Melbourne and Sydney, and just immediately to the south of places like Sydney, where there's a huge increase of properties now for rent that have been added to the rental market. Now, part of that is because some of those properties may have been Airbnb that were really geared towards tourism. Also, a lot of properties that were geared towards student accommodation, just relying upon overseas students coming in and renting, and they tend to rent close to the city and to the universities and all that kind of stuff. So we've seen a lot of things like Airbnb now being added to the regular rental market. So I think I saw a statistic the other day from CoreLogic that some of these areas in Melbourne and Sydney that I talked about, there's been about a 30% increase in properties available for rent. So that has downward pressure on rentals. Some of the agents I've spoken to have said, look, a lot of tenants are talking about trying to get rental reductions, and some of these investors have to probably reduce their expectations. So maybe a sort of 10 or 15% reduction on some of these rentals is not out of the ordinary, but we're not seeing, an equivalent fall in property prices.
Yeah, sure. Are you noticing any trends emerging at this stage with numerical sort of trends, or too early to tell?
Look, I think it's a bit early, because what's obviously happened is that a lot of potential vendors from a couple of months ago now simply decided to withdraw from the market. And they said, well, look, we don't know what's going on with this, how bad this whole pandemic COVID-19 thing is likely to be. We don't know the real impact. Let's just stay put. So what we've seen is a lot of those properties being withdrawn. So it's a very unprecedented, unusual time that we're in. I'm not sure we can compare it to the GFC, which a lot of people like to say, well, we had the GFC. This is very different. We didn't shut down the economy during the GFC. The economy marched on. So there's a lot of things in play here. So I'm not sure of anything emerging really at the moment. There's all sorts of talk about, I'll just digress briefly about things like more people working from home. So I think with more people working from home, if that's a future trend, what impact is that likely to have, say, on the office market, the demand for office space? So, and also interestingly, you might find more demand in terms of residential, where you've got a property that has accommodation that includes maybe a study, where you can have that home office. So, and that applies to apartments, because you can get something as simple as a one-bedroom apartment plus a study area. It could be a room, or it could be like a cupboard style thing where you open up this cupboard, you've got a desk there, you put your laptop there. So I think that might be interesting. And also, even with housing, whether new homes being built, whether there's going to be a greater emphasis on having a dedicated area for a home office. So that's something that could occur. But I think there's things in play now that no one really knows. Are we going to get a second wave of this? No one can answer that question. It just remains to be seen. A lot of the banks gave a moratorium on mortgage repayments for 6 months. Most of those are probably going to cease by the end of September. We've got the government's JobKeeper allowance, which is also scheduled to finish at the end of September. So I think there's a lot of major things in play, and it really remains to be seen how those things actually unfold. But you don't want to get into the area of too many predictions, because I've heard in the next 6 to 12 months properties will go up. They won't increase at all. They'll go down by 10%, 20%, 30% and 40%. So, go figure. So we can only really report on what we're seeing today, I guess.
Yeah. Sure. And I suppose moving forward, you touched on there that it is the unknown, but do you think there are some things with the way we have been operating and the market's been operating under a different circumstances that will change the way we operate moving forward? So things that are arising from this pandemic that will sort of reshape our focus moving forward.
Oh, look, definitely. I can see how the whole concept of, say, properties being sold by auction, where you open your front door on a Saturday morning for inspection, and 100 complete strangers come storming into your house. I suspect that might change, where a lot of owners might say, well, hang on, why are we letting the whole neighbourhood into the house? Let's just let in genuinely qualified purchasers that are genuinely interested, not letting everyone in. So I can see how that may change, and there might be a bit more vetting around that kind of thing. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So I think some things will change. The workplace will definitely change. A lot more people working from home, greater reliance upon what you and I are doing today, just sort of online telecommunications stuff. A lot more meetings being online. Suddenly we don't need to travel to Melbourne for a meeting. We can all do it online. So I think there will definitely be changes. I don't think we're going back to whatever was happening before, but we will have a new normal coming up.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing your insights today, Peter. Some really great information there, and it's still an unknown future for the broader impacts on the residential property market, but looking like things are holding relatively stable and fairly consistent across the nation. So we at Acumentis are here to help answer any further questions. If anyone watching has further questions or requires some support with their property requirements, please reach out to our team on 1300 882 431 and keep an eye out for our next conversation, which will be coming to you soon. And we might dive into some more state-specific information on the residential sector. So thanks again for your time, Peter.
Thanks, Amy. Take care. Bye.